"Why does your driver have the wrong badge?" the little black girl whispered. Nathaniel Crawford stopped with the silver fork halfway to his mouth. The candlelight from the long glass dining table trembled across the surface of the steak in front of him, reflecting crystal glasses, gold flatware, and the face of the driver standing silently behind his chair. Around the table, board members and investors from 3 different states fell quiet one by one, as if the room itself had missed a heartbeat. Victoria Langford gave a soft, embarrassed laugh and touched Nathaniel's sleeve. "Honey, she's just confused," she said smoothly. "Amara shouldn't even be in here." But the little girl did not look at Victoria. She pointed at the man reflected in the silver plate. "Michael's badge has a scratch across the number 7, she said quietly. "That one doesn't." Nathaniel lowered the fork slowly. For the first time all evening, the driver behind him did not look relaxed. 3 hours earlier, rain clouds had already begun gathering over the Crawford estate, turning the giant windows of the mansion gray long before sunset. The house smelled faintly of polished wood, expensive perfume, and garlic butter drifting from the kitchen downstairs. Staff moved quickly through the hallways preparing for the private investor dinner that would decide whether Nathaniel's company signed a shipping merger worth nearly $2 billion. In the service corridor behind the ballroom kitchen, 11-year-old Amara Reed stood on a milk crate folding linen napkins beside her mother. Her mother, Denise, worked weekends for the Crawford estate whenever bills stacked too high on the kitchen counter back home. Amara usually stayed quiet, kept her hood down, and tried not to touch anything expensive. Rich people noticed fingerprints. Poor people noticed what happened after things broke. "Keep your eyes low tonight," Denise whispered while stacking polished forks into velvet trays. "No wandering around, baby. Ms. Victoria already thinks I bring you here too much." Amara nodded. She always nodded first, but she still watched everything. That was the problem. Near the kitchen doorway, 2 servers rolled in a cart carrying dry-aged steaks under silver covers. One of the covers shifted slightly as the cart hit a crack in the tile. Amara smelled something strange for half a second. Not rotten, not burned, sharp, bitter, like medicine crushed into metal. She frowned and looked up. A man stood near the service entrance wearing the black suit and chauffeur cap of Nathaniel's driver. But Michael usually smiled at kitchen staff and carried peppermints in his coat pocket. This man never spoke. He only checked his watch and kept glancing toward the dining hall cameras mounted near the ceiling corners. One of the cooks waved at him. "Hey, Mike, Mr. Crawford still wants the Bordeaux opened before the second course?" The man answered too slowly. "Yeah, sure." Amara's eyes narrowed. Michael was from Atlanta. His voice always dragged softly at the ends of words. This man clipped every sentence short. The driver walked toward the steak cart. He thought nobody was watching. Amara saw him remove something tiny from his pocket. A dark glass vial no bigger than her thumb. One quick movement over a plate. Then gone again. Amara stopped folding napkins. The driver looked up sharply. Their eyes met for less than a second. He smiled immediately afterward, polite and calm. But the smile arrived too late, like he had remembered it instead of feeling it. "You lost, kid?" he asked. Amara said nothing. The kitchen suddenly felt colder than before. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, a piano track began playing through hidden speakers as guests arrived upstairs. Denise touched Amara's shoulder gently. "Don't stare," she whispered. But Amara wasn't looking at the man anymore. She was looking at the badge clipped to his jacket. The number stamped beneath the Crawford crest read 417. Michael's always ended with a scratched 7. This one looked brand new. And near the bottom edge of the badge, barely visible under the kitchen lights, there was a thin smear of fresh glue. The smear of glue should not have mattered. Amara knew that. Rich people replaced badges all the time. Staff lost things. Security printed new ones downstairs near the garage office every week. But she could not stop, staring at the edge of the plastic card while the man turned away from the steak cart. Fresh glue meant something had been changed too recently, and people who belonged somewhere usually did not need to glue themselves into place. "Amara." Her mother's voice came sharper this time. "Eyes down. Amara blinked and quickly folded the last linen napkin, but she still watched the driver from the corner of her eye. He walked past the prep counter toward the hallway leading upstairs. As he passed the kitchen clock, she noticed something else. Michael always tapped the clock twice with his knuckles when he crossed under it. A dumb little habit. He once joked it kept bad luck away during long drives. This man walked straight past without looking at it. The kitchen television mounted near the pantry played muted local news while rain streaked the service entrance windows. One of the cooks cursed softly after dropping a tray of asparagus. Another server laughed too loudly at something nobody else heard. Everything sounded normal. That was what made Amara's stomach hurt. Because underneath all the normal sounds, something felt tilted. Denise carried a silver pitcher toward the ballroom doors. "Stay in the back hallway until dinner starts," she whispered to Amara. "And don't talk to guests tonight. Ms. Victoria already complained once." Amara nodded again. But when Denise disappeared through the swinging doors, Amara slipped quietly toward the security monitor room beside the wine storage corridor. She was not supposed to be there. Kids of staff learned invisible rules early. Don't touch expensive things. Don't ask rich questions. Don't let people think you are watching them. The monitor room door stood half open. Inside, two security guards argued softly over a football game, while black and white camera feeds flickered across 6 screens. Amara looked quickly toward the feed showing the kitchen hallway. The timestamp skipped forward nearly 4 minutes, then corrected itself. She frowned. One guard muttered, "System's lagging again." The other shrugged without looking up from his phone. Probably weather. But the rain outside had slowed almost 20 minutes ago. Amara stepped back before they noticed her. For missing minutes. Maybe that meant nothing too. Except she had seen the driver near the steak cart exactly during those missing minutes. Upstairs, music drifted softly through hidden ceiling speakers, while guests arrived in pressed tuxedos and satin dresses. Nathaniel Crawford stood near the fireplace greeting investors with the easy calm of a man used to room stopping when he entered them. Tall, silver at the temples, a navy suit tailored so sharply it looked almost military. But exhaustion sat underneath his smile tonight. Not dramatic exhaustion, the quiet kind. The kind people hid behind expensive watches and polite handshakes. Victoria adjusted his tie gently before one of the guests approached. "You forgot your phone again," she said with a soft laugh, slipping it into his jacket pocket. Her fingers stayed there 1 second longer than necessary. Nathaniel thanked her automatically. Then his expression changed just slightly. "Did Michael pick up the contracts from my office?" he asked. Victoria answered too fast. "Already handled." She kissed his cheek lightly and turned toward the guests before he could ask anything else. Nathaniel stood still for half a second watching her walk away. Then he reached into his pocket for his phone. A notification glowed briefly across the screen before disappearing. "Missed call. Michael H. 5:12 p.m. Nathaniel frowned. Michael never called during work unless something was wrong. Before he could open the notification, Victoria returned carrying champagne and slipped her arm through his. "They're waiting for you," she said warmly. Across the ballroom entrance, Amara froze. The driver stood near the staircase now, expression calm again, one hand behind his back, and clipped beneath the edge of his jacket, almost hidden against the black fabric. She saw something small catching the chandelier light, a second security badge. The second badge disappeared beneath the driver's jacket almost as quickly as Amara noticed it. But once you saw something wrong, it became hard to see anything else. The ballroom doors opened wider as servers carried in trays of wine and candlelit appetizers. Guests laughed softly beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers while rainwater slid down the tall windows overlooking the dark lawn. Somewhere near the piano, someone mentioned stock prices. Someone else joked about private jets being delayed in Chicago weather. The room sounded rich, safe, untouchable. But Amara stayed near the service hallway gripping a folded linen napkin too tightly in her hands. Her eyes never left the driver. Nathaniel accepted a glass of Bordeaux from a server and glanced again at the missed call notification on his phone. It had vanished now beneath new messages from investors and legal advisors. Still, something about it bothered him. Michael hated phone calls. The man preferred texts, usually one-word updates with too many periods at the end. Running late. Traffic bad. Here now. Nathaniel excused himself politely from the guests and stepped toward the side corridor near the coat room where the music sounded quieter. He pressed call back. One ring. Then voicemail. "Hey, Mr. Crawford," Michael's recorded voice said warmly. "Leave a message. Unless this is about the Knicks again, because I already told you they're hopeless." Nathaniel almost smiled automatically. Almost. Then he noticed the timestamp under the missed call. 5:12 p.m. Michael had supposedly called from the estate driveway while preparing the car. But at 5:12, Nathaniel clearly remembered seeing the driver already inside the mansion carrying wine crates through the kitchen corridor. He frowned faintly. Tiny thing. Probably nothing. Still, his thumb hovered over the screen 1 second longer before he slipped the phone back into his pocket. Problem. Victoria appeared beside him so quietly he nearly startled. Her smile looked perfect under the hallway lights. Soft, concerned, controlled. Nathaniel shook his head. Michael called earlier. Did he? Her answer came instantly. Too instantly. Probably checking tomorrow's airport schedule. Then she reached for his tie, smoothing it gently again. You're thinking too much tonight. Nathaniel looked at her carefully. Victoria never repeated physical gestures unless she was nervous. He had learned that years ago during merger negotiations. Whenever pressure built, her hands found something to straighten. Cufflink, collar, a champagne glass stem. Did you speak to Michael today? He asked lightly. Victoria's fingers paused for less than a heartbeat against his tie. Briefly. He sounded sick? A little. She smiled again. Nathaniel, please don't interrogate the staff before dinner. Her tone stayed playful, but something colder flickered underneath it. Before Nathaniel could answer, Amara appeared at the far end of the corridor near the kitchen entrance. Denise caught sight of her immediately and hurried over. I told you to stay back, she whispered sharply. You trying to get me fired? Amara lowered her eyes. Sorry. But she did not move away. Nathaniel noticed she was holding something inside the folded napkin now. Small, square-shaped. Victoria noticed too. Her expression changed so slightly most people would have missed it. The smile stayed. The eyes didn't. What's that, sweetheart? Victoria asked gently. Amara hesitated. Denise stepped in quickly. Nothing important, ma'am. Just trash from the prep tables. Then throw it away, Victoria said, still smiling. Amara looked down at the napkin in her hands, then slowly unfolded one corner. A plastic key card slid halfway into view. Black with silver lettering. Garage entry staff only. Nathaniel frowned immediately. Michael's access card? Denise looked confused. Why would she have that? Amara swallowed hard before answering. I found it in the trash beside the kitchen freezer. Victoria laughed softly. Too softly. Well, there's your explanation. Michael probably dropped it earlier. But Amara shook her head. No, ma'am. Her voice stayed quiet, but this time it did not shake. Because this card was cut in half first. Nathaniel took the card from her slowly. The edges were rough and uneven, recently snapped apart and glued back together badly. And across the magnetic strip, there was a thin dark stain that looked almost black beneath the hallway lights. Then his phone vibrated again. Another message. This one from estate security downstairs. Camera feed lost. Garage level B. 5:11 to 5:16 p.m. The message stayed glowing on. Nathaniel's phone screen for only a few seconds before fading black again. Camera feed lost. Garage level B. 5:11 to 5:16 p.m. The exact same minutes Michael's call had come through. The exact same minutes Amara had seen the driver near the kitchen carts. Nathaniel looked down at the damaged key card in his hand. The hallway suddenly felt narrower than before. Warmer. Too warm for October rain. Sir. One of the security supervisors approached from the ballroom entrance, straightening his jacket as he walked. Dinner service is ready. His eyes dropped briefly toward Amara and the broken garage card. Just briefly, but long enough. Victoria stepped smoothly between them before Nathaniel could speak. "This has gone far enough," she said softly. Not angry. That would have looked suspicious. Calm was always more powerful in rooms like this. "Nathaniel, your investors are waiting, and this child is frightened." Denise immediately lowered her head.
"I'm sorry, Mom."
She shouldn't have touched anything. "Mom, I found it in the trash," Amara said quietly. "That doesn't mean anything," Victoria replied with a sympathetic smile that never reached her eyes. "Sweetheart, staff throw damaged cards away every day." The security supervisor nodded politely. "We replaced several access cards last week after the storm outage." Logical, reasonable, professional. Nathaniel knew that tone. Corporate damage control always sounded gentle before it sounded final. "Then why glue it back together?" Amara asked. Nobody answered immediately. The rain outside tapped softly against the tall hallway windows. Somewhere deeper inside the mansion, crystal glasses clinked and guests laughed at something distant and expensive. Denise touched Amara's shoulder tighter this time. A warning. Stop talking. Stop noticing things rich people don't want noticed. Victoria crouched slightly so she appeared kinder standing near the child. "Amara," she said warmly, "I know you're trying to help, but tonight is important for Mr. Crawford. Sometimes when people get nervous, they imagine patterns that aren't really there." Nathaniel watched Amara carefully then. Most children would have backed down under that voice. Victoria had spent years mastering rooms without ever raising hers. But Amara only tightened her grip on the folded napkin. "I'm not nervous," she said. "I just remember things." One of the board members wandered into the hallway holding a whiskey glass. "Everything all right?" he asked casually. Victoria smiled immediately. "Of course. Tiny misunderstanding with one of the staff kids." Staff kid. 2 small words. But Nathaniel saw Denise flinch almost invisibly when she heard them. Amara heard it too. She did not look embarrassed. She looked tired, like someone already used to being reduced in rich rooms. "Nathaniel," Victoria said gently, touching his arm again. "Please don't let this distract you before the signing dinner." The security supervisor stepped forward. "Sir, I can escort the child and her mother back to the service wing." Escort. Another polite word. It sounded cleaner than remove. Nathaniel looked at the broken card once more. The dark stain near the magnetic strip had smeared slightly onto his thumb now. Ink maybe. Grease maybe. He rubbed it absently against his palm while thinking. "Run a check on the garage feed outage," he said finally. The supervisor nodded immediately. "Already handled, sir. Just weather interference." Too fast. Nathaniel noticed that too. "And Michael?" he asked lightly. "Anyone confirm he actually called in sick?" A pause. Small. But there. The supervisor glanced once toward Victoria before answering. "I can verify that for you." Victoria's smile returned instantly. "Nathaniel, honestly, this is becoming ridiculous." She laughed softly and stood again. "You're questioning your own staff because of a damaged keycard from a trash bin." Nathaniel said nothing. Amara looked down at the napkin in her hands as if debating something with herself. Then slowly, carefully, she unfolded the final corner. A tiny silver object rolled into her palm. A cuff button. Black enamel with the Crawford crest stamped into the center. Nathaniel's expression changed immediately. Michael wore custom cuff buttons every night he drove formal events. One had gone missing 3 days ago. "Where did you get that?" Nathaniel asked quietly. Amara swallowed once. "It was stuck to the glue on the card," she whispered. Then she looked toward the driver standing motionless near the ballroom entrance. "And Michael would never throw that away." The hallway seemed to lose sound after Amara said it. "Michael would never throw that away." Nathaniel stared at the cuff button resting in the little girl's palm. Black enamel. Silver crest. Tiny scratch near the edge shaped almost like a crescent moon. He remembered exactly when that scratch happened. 3 winters ago during a blizzard outside Albany. When Michael changed a tire himself in sub-zero wind, because Nathaniel's security detail had gotten stranded 30 miles behind them. Michael laughed afterward and said expensive things broke just as easy as cheap things if you hit enough ice. Nathaniel had given him the custom cuff set the following Christmas. Michael wore them only at formal events. Always polished. Always matched. "Sir?" the security supervisor asked carefully. "Would you like me to continue checking the garage system?" Nathaniel did not answer immediately. He took the cuff button from Amara very slowly, almost carefully enough for it to break. Victoria folded her arms lightly. "Nathaniel," she said with patient concern, "please don't tell me you're entertaining this." "Entertaining what?" he asked quietly. "A child building stories out of trash." Her smile returned again, softer this time. "People see strange things when they want attention." Amara lowered her eyes at that, but she did not step backward. Denise did, just slightly. Nathaniel noticed that too. Years around wealth had taught some people survival through shrinking. "Where exactly did you find it?" Nathaniel asked Amara. "Behind the freezer near the loading hallway," she answered. "There was glue on the floor too." The security supervisor cleared his throat. Maintenance probably repaired damaged access cards there earlier. Again too smooth, too ready. Nathaniel slipped the cuff button into his jacket pocket. "Then show me the maintenance report." The supervisor blinked once before nodding. "Of course." Victoria's expression stayed composed, but her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass hard enough for Nathaniel to notice the tendons shift beneath her skin. Then her phone buzzed. Just once. A short vibration. She glanced down automatically before turning the screen away. Too late. Nathaniel caught only part of the notification across the black screen before it disappeared. "Car ready." The words landed strangely in his mind. Not because they meant anything alone, but because Michael never texted Victoria about transportation. Ever. "Excuse me one moment," Victoria said pleasantly. "I need to check on seating arrangements." She walked away without waiting for an answer.
Calm pace.
Controlled shoulders, but faster than before. Nathaniel watched her disappear toward the ballroom entrance while rainwater crawled down the windows behind her like thin gray veins. Then he turned toward the driver standing near the staircase. "What's your name again?" he asked. The man answered immediately this time. "Daniel, sir." Not Michael forgot. Not temporary replacement. Just Daniel. Nathaniel nodded slowly. "How long have you worked with Hawthorne Security?" A flicker crossed the man's face. Tiny. "About 8 months." "Interesting," Nathaniel said lightly, "because Hawthorne dissolved their executive transport division last spring." Silence. Small. Sharp. The driver smiled half a second too late. "Contract restructuring, sir." Nathaniel gave a short nod as if satisfied. But something inside him had already begun rearranging itself quietly. He had spent 20 years building billion-dollar negotiations by studying pauses more than words. And tonight, the pauses were beginning to speak louder than anything else in the mansion. Down the hallway, Amara suddenly looked toward the service elevator. "That's weird," she whispered. Nobody answered at first. "What?" Denise asked nervously. Amara pointed toward the glowing elevator panel. The service elevator had just gone down to garage level B, but nobody had stepped inside it. Nathaniel followed her gaze. The number over the elevator shifted slowly from 1 to B, then stopped. A few seconds later, his phone buzzed again. Another security alert. Garage exit opened. 6:42 p.m. Authorized by M. Harris. Authorized by M. Harris. Nathaniel stared at the alert while something cold settled quietly beneath his ribs. Michael Harris. The real Michael. Whoever had opened the garage exit downstairs had used Michael's credentials after the system outage, which meant one of two things. Either Michael was still somewhere inside the estate, or someone else had access to everything tied to his name. The ballroom doors opened behind them, spilling warm light and laughter into the hallway. A waiter passed carrying champagne flutes on a silver tray, while investors drifted toward the dining room completely unaware that the atmosphere inside the mansion had begun changing shape. Nathaniel slid his phone into his pocket. Calmly, carefully. Dinner starts in 5, Victoria called from across the ballroom. Her voice floated lightly over the music. Nathaniel. He looked toward her. She stood beside the fireplace, smiling at guests with perfect posture and perfect timing. Anyone watching would have seen a graceful hostess managing an elegant evening. Nathaniel saw something else now. Every time his attention drifted away from her, she checked the hallway. Every few seconds. Not nervous enough for panic. Just enough to monitor movement. Sir? The security supervisor asked quietly. Would you like me to investigate the garage exit? Nathaniel looked at him for a long moment before answering. No, the man blinked once, surprised. Nathaniel straightened his cuff slowly. Just bring me the raw camera backup from levels A and B after dinner. Of course. And don't mention it to anyone else. Another tiny pause. Understood. Nathaniel walked back toward the ballroom, then stopped beside Amara near the service entrance. Up close, he could see she was trying not to tremble. Not from fear exactly. From pressure. Children were not supposed to carry rooms like this on their shoulders. Did anyone tell you to bring me that card? He asked softly. Amara shook her head. No, sir. Then why risk it? Denise looked horrified by the question. Amara. Stop bothering Mr. Crawford. But Amara answered anyway. Because somebody's lying. Nathaniel studied her face carefully. No performance. No excitement. No child trying to feel important. Just certainty mixed with fear for what truth might cost. Do you know what people can lose for accusing the wrong person? Denise whispered urgently. Mom, Amara said quietly. What if he loses more if nobody says anything? The hallway went still again after that. Nathaniel looked away first. Somewhere nearby, a dishwasher hummed behind the kitchen walls while rain tapped softly against the mansion windows. Ordinary sounds. But now every normal sound seemed to hide another layer beneath it. Nathaniel stepped into the private study beside the dining room and shut the door halfway. The room smelled faintly of leather and cedar smoke. He pulled open his laptop and accessed the estate personnel system himself instead of routing through staff. Michael Harris, active employee status. No sick leave filed. No temporary replacement request approved. Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. Then he opened vehicle logs. At 5:14 p.m., the primary town car registered manual garage access from Michael's credentials. But according to tonight's schedule, Michael should already have been upstairs preparing departure protocols. Nathaniel enlarged the timestamp. Something else caught his eye. The exit authorization had been approved remotely from Victoria's executive access tablet. He stared at the screen without moving. Very slowly, he remembered the way she had touched his tie earlier. The way she redirected every question before it fully formed. The way she answered too quickly whenever Michael's name came up. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His longtime attorney, Richard Bell, stepped quietly into the office. You asked for me? Nathaniel nodded once and turned the laptop slightly. I want a toxicology screen run on tonight's steak. Richard's expression changed immediately. Nathaniel? Quietly, he said. No police. No security teams. No calls unless they go through you. Richard lowered his voice. Do you think someone's trying to poison you? Nathaniel looked through the half-open study door toward the ballroom where Victoria stood laughing beside the investors under golden chandelier light. Beautiful. Composed. Familiar. I think, he said slowly, I may have trusted the wrong person for a very long time. Richard closed the study door carefully behind him, muting the sound of piano music and dinner conversation from the ballroom beyond. The office suddenly felt smaller, quieter. Nathaniel remained seated behind the desk, one hand resting near the damaged garage card, while toxicology files loaded slowly across his laptop screen. The small loading wheel kept turning. Turning. Rain tapped against the dark windows in soft, uneven bursts. If this is real, Richard said quietly, you understand we may already be too late. Nathaniel did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the security still frame paused on screen. Garage level B. 5:13 p.m. Grainy footage. A black SUV near the service elevator. A man in chauffeur black entering frame for less than 2 seconds before the feed cut out. No, Nathaniel said finally. If we were too late, I'd already be dead. Richard looked toward the ballroom through the half-open blinds. Then what do you want to do? Nathaniel closed the laptop slowly. I want to see who panics first. 10 minutes later, the second dinner course began beneath chandelier light and quiet orchestral music. Investors discussed shipping routes and fuel projections while servers moved between tables carrying wine and silver trays. Nathaniel returned to the ballroom calm enough that nobody looking at him would suspect anything had changed. That frightened Richard more than panic would have. Across the room, Victoria smiled with visible relief the moment she saw Nathaniel sit back down. Too much relief. Amara noticed it too from the service corridor beside the kitchen doors. She stood holding a tray of folded napkins almost taller than her chest while Denise whispered for the 5th time that night, "Keep your head down." But Amara kept watching the driver instead. The fake one. Daniel. He had stopped pretending to relax now. Every few minutes his eyes drifted toward the hallway leading to the garage elevators. Like he was waiting for permission to leave. Nathaniel lifted his wineglass but did not drink. "Daniel," he called casually across the room. The driver approached immediately. "Sir." Nathaniel slid his car keys onto the tablecloth beside the untouched steak plate. "I forgot my leather folder in the town car. Bring it up for me." 1 second. Maybe less. But Amara saw it. The hesitation. Tiny. Sharp. The driver's fingers hovered over the keys without touching them. "Of course," he said finally. "Which vehicle, sir?" Nathaniel looked up slowly. "The one Michael drove this morning." Silence touched the table like cold air. Victoria laughed softly before anyone else could react. "Nathaniel, honestly, we have 3 black SUVs." But Nathaniel never looked at her. He kept watching Daniel. The man smiled carefully now. "Right? The Escalade. Wrong." Amara knew it immediately because Michael always drove the gray Range Rover during investor nights. Nathaniel knew it too, but he only nodded once and handed over the keys. "Take your time." Daniel walked away too fast after that. Calm shoulders. Fast steps. Richard quietly unfolded his napkin beside Nathaniel. "You did that on purpose," he murmured. Nathaniel's eyes stayed on the hallway exit. And he guessed wrong. Nathaniel took a slow sip of water instead of wine. "No," he said quietly. He guessed. Across the ballroom, Victoria reached for her phone beneath the tablecloth. Small movement. Hidden movement. But Amara saw the screen light briefly before she turned it downward. One outgoing message. Then immediately deleted. Amara glanced toward Nathaniel. He noticed too. A few minutes passed. Nobody spoke about the tension directly, which somehow made it heavier. A server accidentally dropped a spoon near the fireplace and nearly jumped at the sound. Then Nathaniel's phone buzzed once against the white tablecloth. Richard looked down first. The message came from the estate garage cameras Nathaniel had quietly rerouted through his private server. Live feed restored garage level B. Nathaniel opened the feed beneath the table. Grainy footage flickered onto the screen. The gray Range Rover sat exactly where Michael always parked it. Engine off. Empty. But beside the vehicle stood Daniel holding the car keys in one hand and speaking urgently into a phone with the other. Then another figure stepped into frame from the shadows near the elevator. Victoria's chief of security. He handed Daniel a small dark vial no larger than a thumb. At the service doorway, Amara stopped breathing for a second because the driver suddenly turned his head sharply toward the ballroom camera above the garage entrance. And for the first time all night, he looked directly into it like he finally understood someone had been watching him back. Daniel's face disappeared from the garage feed a second later when the screen abruptly froze. Then the image cut to black again. Around the ballroom, nobody noticed. Investors still discussed shipping forecasts beneath chandelier light while waiters refilled water glasses and candle flames trembled softly against crystal. But at Nathaniel's table, something had changed permanently. Richard looked down at the dead screen. They know, he said quietly. Nathaniel did not answer. Across the room, Victoria had gone very still. Not frightened, calculating, like someone mentally rearranging exits. Then her phone buzzed again beneath the tablecloth. She glanced at it once and stood immediately with a graceful smile. "Excuse me, everyone," she said warmly. "I need to check on dessert service." Nathaniel rose at the exact same moment. "Actually," he said calmly, "I think everyone should stay seated." The room softened into silence almost instantly. Not panic, confusion. Board members exchanged small, uncertain looks while silverware paused above untouched plates. Victoria turned slowly toward him, still smiling. "Nathaniel." He picked up his wineglass but did not drink from it. "Richard," he said quietly, "connect the study monitor to the ballroom projector." Nobody moved for one long second except Amara near the service entrance. She looked toward Nathaniel carefully, as if realizing this was the moment adults stopped pretending nothing was wrong.
Victoria laughed softly.
"Honey, this isn't the time for business presentations." Nathaniel finally looked directly at her. "No," he said, "it's time for honesty." Richard crossed the ballroom toward the control panel beside the fireplace. The projector screen lowered slowly from the ceiling with a low mechanical hum that suddenly sounded deafening in the silence. Victoria's smile faded for the first time all night. Only slightly, but enough. "Nathaniel," she said under her breath, "whatever you think you saw." The garage footage appeared across the screen before she could finish. Grainy black and white video filled the ballroom wall. Daniel beside the Range Rover, the chief of security handing him the dark vial. Timestamp visible in the corner. 6:48 p.m. Nobody in the room spoke. One investor quietly lowered his fork onto the plate. Another reached to mute his phone. Victoria stared at the footage without blinking, then immediately recovered. "This proves nothing," she said smoothly. "Security transfers medication all the time." Nathaniel nodded once. "Calm. Terrifyingly calm." "Then let's continue." Richard opened a second file. This time the ballroom speakers crackled softly before an audio recording filled the room. Static first, wind, then voices. "Once he signs tomorrow, everything becomes ours." Victoria's voice, clear, cold. Another male voice answered too quietly to identify. Then Victoria again. Michael was supposed to keep him distracted longer. Across the ballroom, somebody inhaled sharply. Victoria's face lost color so gradually it almost looked like the light leaving a photograph. "That recording is edited," she said quickly. "Anyone could fake audio now." But before anyone else could speak, Amara stepped forward from the service doorway holding something against her chest. Her old cracked phone. The same one she had hidden inside her hoodie pocket all evening because she knew nobody would believe her without proof. "It's not edited," she said quietly. "I forgot my charger near the greenhouse after my mom cleaned there yesterday." Her voice shook once, then steadied. "The recording started by accident when I picked the phone up." She handed the phone carefully to Richard instead of Nathaniel. Not because she trusted lawyers more, because she understood chain of custody without knowing the phrase for it. Richard connected the device. The original timestamp appeared on the ballroom screen. October 14th. 5:41 p.m. Location tag, East Greenhouse Corridor. Victoria looked toward Amara then. Really looked at her for the first time all night. Not as staff, not as a child, as a threat. Nathaniel saw that look. And suddenly another memory surfaced hard enough to make his chest tighten. 3 months ago, Denise had filed a quiet complaint about cameras being disabled near staff housing during night shifts. Victoria personally dismissed it as a technical error. Nathaniel signed the closure report without reading more than the first page. He slowly removed his glasses now and set them beside the untouched steak plate. The ballroom remained completely silent except for rain against the windows. "You knew," he said softly to Victoria. Not loud. Somehow worse because it wasn't. "Under my roof. You knew." Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out this time. Nathaniel looked toward Richard without taking his eyes off her. Then he placed Michael's cuff button carefully onto the white tablecloth beside the cracked phone and said in a voice so calm it froze the entire room, "Call my attorney." Nobody at the table touched their food after that. The projector light still glowed across the ballroom wall, frozen on the grainy image of Daniel beside the SUV, while rain moved like silver threads behind the mansion windows. Victoria stood perfectly still near the fireplace, but the performance was gone now. No more effortless laughter, no more graceful corrections, just calculation unraveling in real time. Richard stepped away from the table first, already dialing numbers with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood the next few hours would change multiple lives. "Federal counsel is on their way," he said calmly, "and I've contacted internal investigators." Victoria looked at Nathaniel one last time. "You're making a mistake." Her voice sounded smaller now. Not softer, smaller. Nathaniel held her gaze without anger. Somehow that hurt more to watch. "No," he said quietly. "I made the mistake months ago when people under my roof tried to tell me something was wrong, and I signed papers instead of listening." The chief of security attempted to leave through the side corridor then stopped when two estate officers blocked the hallway entrance. Nobody grabbed him. Nobody shouted. But for the first time all evening, the balance of power inside the mansion had shifted completely. Daniel was found less than 20 minutes later near the lower garage exit, trying to access one of the backup vehicles with a cloned security card. In his jacket pocket, investigators recovered the dark vial from the footage and a prepaid phone linked to offshore payments routed through shell accounts connected to Victoria's private foundation. The engagement ended before midnight. No dramatic scene. Nathaniel simply removed the ring from his finger in the study while lawyers documented evidence downstairs. Victoria watched him place it on the desk beside Michael's cuff button without saying another word. By morning, every board member had received copies of the recordings, security reports, and financial transfers. The chief of security was terminated immediately pending criminal investigation. Victoria's access to company accounts, charity funds, and estate property was revoked before sunrise. 2 weeks later, federal investigators confirmed traces of neurotoxin in residue recovered from the steak plate and serving utensils. Michael Harris was found alive in a rented cabin nearly 70 miles outside the city, dehydrated and sedated, but conscious enough to testify. When Nathaniel visited him in the hospital, Michael's first words were not about the kidnapping. "You finally listened to somebody smaller than you," he said weakly from the hospital bed. Nathaniel did not defend himself. He only nodded once. Denise returned to the estate one final time expecting paperwork and dismissal forms. Instead, Nathaniel met her personally in the south office overlooking the gardens. "Your complaint about the disabled cameras should have been investigated," he said quietly. "It wasn't. Management team." Nathaniel funded legal support for several workers who admitted they had stayed silent for fear of losing housing tied to their employment. And Amara's name, once scribbled informally on temporary visitor stickers, appeared properly printed 2 months later on a scholarship acceptance letter from St. Catherine Academy in Boston. Full tuition, transportation, housing assistance for Denise. No publicity campaign attached. No press release. Just paperwork done correctly for once. Late one November evening, long after investigators stopped appearing at the estate, Nathaniel sat in the small kitchen beside the staff courtyard instead of the formal dining hall upstairs. The mansion beyond the windows still looked enormous and expensive and cold.